working towards an enhanced global era between China and UK. British Prime Minister Theresa May says this meeting is happening at a critical time in history. The UK is preparing to leave the European Union, yet is seizing the opportunity to become an ever more outward-looking global Britain. May says the UK is willing to help China realize the vision of a more open market and hopes for wider and deeper business sectors between the two nations.
And that's why I'm accompanied on this trip by a business delegation representing businesses of every size and shape, representing many different sectors and hailing from every corner of the UK. Some have long-established contacts here in China. Others are visiting for the very first time. But all are completely committed to forging lasting relationships with businesses, investors and customers in your country.
Over the past decades, both countries have continually strengthened cooperation areas of trade, finance and education. May expects this cooperation to further enhance advanced technologies and innovation, because she believes this is where the future lies.
And it's a future that excites me, not just because of the possibilities for increased trade, impressive though they are, but also because of the possibilities for greater cooperation between our people. China and the UK have proud histories of innovation, stretching hundreds, even thousands of years. That spirit of invention is still very much alive today, and if we pool our talents further, the results could be extraordinary.
During Prime Minister Theresa May's visit to China this week, deals worth more than £9 billion were signed, creating over 2,500 jobs across the UK. William Shakespeare once said that the golden age is before us, not behind us, and this could perfectly describe the current China-UK relations. And Prime Minister Theresa May's 3-day intensive trip to China expected to tune down the challenges over its planned departure from EU and also bring the golden era relations to a new high. So Yun, CGTN, Shanghai.
Now, as that visit comes to a close, let's discuss the pros and cons with Paul Barber. He joins us in London. Paul, thank you for joining us on the show. Now, as was just mentioned, May left China today with deals worth more than 13 billion US dollars. We also heard China's Xi Jinping calling the visit a golden era in relations between the two countries. So how has this all been received in the UK?
Well, Uche, Prime Minister Theresa May be rather reluctant to be getting on that plane to come back to London, considering the extremely overwhelming positive reception she had in China to her visit. And we saw some very lovely pictures of the Prime Minister and her husband enjoying a tea ceremony with President Xi Jinping and Madame Pen Lingguan, the First Lady. And we even heard that she had a nickname in Chinese media, as in Auntie May, which she was very pleased about. So it's all been rather friendly and comfortable, but it's the big tangible business deals that Prime Minister May is very keen to stress. As you say, over $13 billion worth of deals, 2,500 jobs that those could create here in the UK. So just to break that down a bit, just $1 billion alone in the financial services sector, which could create 900 jobs. British beef could also be back on Chinese menus within 6 months, according to Mrs May. And a British pharmaceutical company signed a $120 billion export deal for baby formula. We also heard that Standard Chartered Bank, which is a UK-based bank, signed a $1.5 billion deal with the China Development Bank to issue loans for the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, that's something that the Chinese media said Britain was extremely intelligent and pragmatic about, and that the UK was a pragmatic model for other Western countries to follow when it comes to the Belt and Road and other Chinese-led initiatives like the AIIB, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. But over here, a different story. Yeah, we saw all these pretty pictures of May having a trip to China, but she's facing increasing concern, both from her party and the country more broadly, that her direction, her decision on which way to go when it comes to our trade relationship after leaving the European Union just isn't clear. And she's had even calls from her own party that she shouldn't even be Prime Minister and should step down. So she'll be rather nervous getting off the plane here in London, but her Trade Minister, Liam Fox, who was in Beijing with her, said, "We just wish Britain and her own party could see the way she's seen in China and the way the UK is seen in China.
Well, Paul, how do you think that will play into discussions around future relations between Britain and China?
Well, they're absolutely essential after Britain leaves the European Union in 2019, as is still the plan. Britain is very keen to sign a free trade agreement with Beijing as soon as possible. They didn't go that far on this 3-day trip to China. They did, however, decide to sign a joint investment trade review. So they are looking at that relationship, and trade between the UK and China is at a record high, $85 billion a year so far. And since 2010, exports from Britain to China have actually risen by 64%, and we've seen 600,000 Chinese visas issued for trips to the UK. So that relationship is growing. But just to put things in perspective, China is still Britain's 5th largest trade place that it exports to. So it puts it way behind the European Union and the US. However, it's increasingly clear that after Brexit, Britain does want a free trade deal with China, but will it be able to do it? That's one of the controversies that Prime Minister May has been facing here at home. Parts of her cabinet have said, well, we want to keep as close a ties as we can to the European Union, which could mean staying in the customs union. If we stayed in the customs union, however, we would not be able to sign free trade deals with other countries so easily, like China. So we have pro-Brexit members of the cabinet saying, no, we absolutely have to break completely free of the customs union so we can have as close a tie as possible to China and other countries such as the United States.
Now, as you said, Paul, relations between the two countries definitely seem warmer this time around. So is there any hangover from Britain's past relations with China, which weren't so great, and the fact that May herself did delay a part Chinese-funded nuclear plant in the UK?
Yes, well, Lucia, you're talking there about the Hinkley nuclear plant in the west of England. Theresa May did postpone that initially after many billions of dollars worth of Chinese investment had been announced, to much fanfare under the previous Prime Minister David Cameron. She postponed that for national security reasons, but it did go ahead, so that is happening. So she's very keen to show that, yes, this is still a golden era between China and the UK. This was a phrase that we first heard from David Cameron when President Xi Jinping made his state visit to the UK back in 2015. Now, Prime Minister May on this trip is very keen to say that this is a very important relationship. It will continue to blossom and to grow. And as we just heard earlier, President Xi even quoted Shakespeare saying that, well, everything that's past is prologue, which meaning it could mean, is it water under the bridge? Everything that's happened before is leading up until this point. So Prime Minister May is returning back to the UK, hoping that that relationship with China is on a much firmer footing than when she left. However, her own premiership could be far less secure. We'll just have to see. Uche.
Well, many thanks, Paul, for those insights. Paul Barber joining us there in London.